Welcome everybody. We're just watching everybody pour in before we get started. Everybody a minute. You're in the right place. We're not frozen. We're just waiting for people to get into the event.
I don't think I've ever gone so long without saying something.
Really? I believe that.
I think that was about a minute.
Yeah, I usually give it a minute, minute and a half.
I don't think it's been, gosh.
Mark is on and he's not saying anything.
I know. Dave and I haven't talked in 2 minutes. We're about to shake it. Hello.
Brian edits all this out for us. So.
I love going through the list of people that are attending. Man, it's fun to see all the friendly faces. I hope we get the regular amount of chat in here because I love seeing all the comments.
Yeah. All right, 3:02. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get started. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is David DiLorenzo of Association Analytics, and once again, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our weekly virtual discussion series where we bring together leaders and learners in fun and engaging sessions aimed at optimizing business results and staying relevant in challenging times. And I know we've all got our beers, so we try to have a little bit of fun along the way too. So feel free to have a cocktail with us as this is our virtual discussion and happy hour. Today's session is going to be great. It is about intelligent engagement and how to collect and leverage your data to engage your members to take action. We're going to look at real life examples, lessons learned, and take away some practical tips to help you improve your connection with members. Just a note that these sessions are always recorded. And during the session, we want to hear from you. See the chat board's already going. So use the chat tool to connect with others, with the panelists, and use the Q&A button to submit questions for our panel. But a lot of those also can come in from the chat, so we're okay with that as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce today's presenters. First, we have Bill Conforti, who's the Senior VP of Strategy and Solutions here at A2 with over 20 years of experience in software products and services. He works closely with all of our clients and prospects, as well as our internal development and delivery teams. He led the development of A2's engagement scoring model and frequently works with clients in engagement workshops. And also a big welcome to Dave Will. While working for SAP, a multi-billion-dollar software company nearly 20 years ago, Dave Will was advised to walk faster and smile less because perception is reality. Dave took this feedback to heart and started a business based on the antithesis of this advice. 14 years later, Dave successfully sold Peach New Media, a learning management system for associations, which is now a part of Community Brands. And since then, he and his leadership team from Peach built an engagement platform called Propfuel, the first intelligent engagement platform designed specifically for member-based organizations to improve their member engagement and build stronger relationships.
Man, David, I couldn't have said that better myself. It's amazing. Well done.
Hey, I'm good at my short job here, Dave. So for those of you who are just joining us, you are in the right place. This is our virtual webinar. And I'm going to turn it over now to Bill to get you guys started.
Okay. Yes, as David said, keep your drinks handy. We encourage everybody to socialize during this time, introduce yourself in the chat, and post all your questions in the Q&A. So we'll answer those throughout, and we'll try to leave some time at the end to also answer some of those questions. We've also been doing an audience poll or two during the last few sessions, so please participate in that one. I think there's only one in today's session. So we have some great content lined up. It started out as kind of a webinar based on data collection, and it turned into one that was more about member engagement. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a quick just for fun. I'm going to introduce you to conceptually to the broad concept of member engagement and scoring, and then Dave's going to talk about how to target that engagement for specific action. And we'll kind of wrap things up at the end with how your broader data ecosystem and all the data that you collect and store, how that enables all of these processes to take place. So with that, we'll go to our just for fun. And so some of us are in places that are kind of opening back up. Some of us are in places that haven't, or we're just being careful. And so I want to ask a question, just you can put your comments in the chat. When things opened up for you, or when they do open up, what are you going to do first, or what did you do first? And I put the Home Depot there. They've kind of been open all along, but I was, scared to go. And so that's the place I've been hitting quite a few times these last couple of weeks. Pools are opening in some places, people are getting their nails done, a haircut, things like that, going to the movies. So what's that thing for you? What are you going to do first, or what did you do first when things opened up in your area? Haircut, yeah.
I can't believe the number of people getting their nails done. That's awesome. There's a business opportunity. I'll do your nails. I'll cut your hair too, for that matter.
Yeah, I see a lot of people that probably needed to visit the barber first.
Are you?
Me, not so much.
Are you pointing at me when you say that?
No, yeah, you. If we lived closer, Dave, I'd have brought the trimmers over for you, buddy. You could be nice and polished.
Yeah, that's looking good. Oh, so while we're thinking through that and putting some answers in the chat, we're going to go to our poll question, which is a simple one. It's, how is your association doing at engaging your members? And Brian put you should see it on your screen. Brian put it up, and I will give you a second to respond to that.
Make sure you select all panels and attendees when you're responding, so everybody can see your response. I noticed some of you are just responding to the panelists. And Michelle, I'm telling you, it's not necessarily going to be a bad haircut if you just give me a chance. At least the second time, it'll be a little bit better than the first time.
All right, what else do we have here? Any travel? Be more specific. Where are you going to travel to? Visit mom? Going to the beach. Congratulations, Emily, purchasing your first home. That's great. Okay, so Brian, let's go ahead and put the answers up. Okay. So 17% are great. Members love us, so congratulations to those 17%. So the majority of people, some say it didn't apply. A few members are completely disengaged, so hopefully you'll get some tips on how you can start to change that. Likewise for the not so good. And then 59% are okay, but could be doing better. So I think I'm not totally surprised by that. What do you think, Dave?
Hey, Bill. Yeah, thank you for asking. I'd love to see a comment from people. What's working? Like, what works really well for you in terms of engaging your members? And we can shut this down and kind of go on with the presentation, but I'd love to read as we're talking what's working for people, no matter how you answer this, what's working well for you?
Okay, so as you guys think through that and put some answers in the chat, I'm going to start to introduce the idea of engagement. And so some of you have heard me talk about this before, and the idea I want to start with is that member engagement is an exchange of value. So you can sort of see this continuum along the bottom. And if you think of the value that the association gets from your members, dues payments, other revenue, time that they volunteer, feedback that they give you, questions that they answer sometimes, and of course data is a good benefit. And then the value that the members get from the association, right? They get networking, they get thought leadership, they might get certain kinds of resources. Advocacy is a big one in many cases. But really the idea here is that some members extract more value than they return, and others provide a lot but don't get as much back. And so what we want to do is we want to be kind of in this sweet spot here in the middle, where the association is providing as much value as possible, and they're also getting the most in return, right? And those customers that are getting that value, they recognize it and appreciate it, right? So these are members that are mission driven. They look at the overall value and not just the price, when it comes to joining and renewing those memberships. They might be brand advocates. They're almost always going to be highly engaged. They might be some of your donors and volunteers. and your top spenders as well. So that's something that we've called profitable promoters before, but there are lots of different names for that persona that's kind of in that sweet spot. So what do engaged members do, right? So when we talk about engagement in the broader sense, right, we mean activities, right? So there are things like membership, they join and renew, they might donate, they subscribe to your publications, or they open your emails, they volunteer, they attend meetings, consume your content, right? There's a lot of digital content on your website. Maybe you have white papers or other things that are available for download. They might interact with each other in a virtual community, and they might take courses, right? There are lots of other things they can do, but you have these systems in place where you track these behaviors and these activities. Most often it's, you know, via an order or a registration or something like that. And what do we do with that is we want to score it, right? So here is an example of an engagement score model. It's a donut chart, and this one has a lot of the relevant information is kind of left off, and it's just a sample here, right? So it's three easy steps. It's choose your activities, right? And so each one of these sections in the donut represents an activity. Then we assign weights, and the size of each one of those sections corresponds to the weight of that activity. In other words, it's kind of like how important it is to us. And then we calculate the score. And so, you know, using these weights, we calculate the score based on the unique requirements of the business. And this is potentially a whole hour-long webinar topic, so we won't get too deep into this, but the idea is, you know, we track activities and we want to use that to calculate scores so that we can then compare our members to each other. And as we all know, the data, you know, for all those different things, it lives in different places, right? All over the association. And you've seen this slide in a couple of our presentations already, because the idea is that we need a good data repository to keep track of the data, you know, across all those different systems, right? If you look at a typical association tech stack, the data is going to be siloed in your AMS, in your community, in your marketing system, and we need to extract information that lives in all of these different places, right? So the name of the game is to combine and connect this data so that we can come up with what we refer to as the 360-degree view. All right. So in the 360 view, this is all the data that we can collect on our members. And here's an example of what it looks like in our product. It's called Acumen. There are other products that could potentially do this, but the key elements are going to be things like the engagement score, right? According to some methodology, like we talked about before, some semblance of a current point distribution, right? So for each one of these people, how many of the points that were possible did they actually get, right? And so this person is highly engaged, so they have almost all the points in all the areas. This one is middle of the road, not so well engaged, and they have, you know, a lot of points in some areas, but very few in others. Now, the other thing we care about is the trend over time, because we want to know, are we doing better or are we doing worse when it comes to engaging our members? And you can't really see the, you know, what they correspond to, but when you look at these ribbon charts, the interesting thing is that, well, number one, these two members value different things, right? So the value proposition, or at least the perceived value of the membership experience, is way different, you know, potentially from one member to another. And the other thing is that certain behaviors, certain engagements become more or less important over time, right? So one of the things that's cool about analysis with the ribbon chart is we're kind of always looking at what is most important, right? So what's the biggest part of this whole, right? What comprises, you know, the biggest part of an engagement score of 50 or 70 or 100, whatever it may be, right? And we use that profile and the score in almost everything that we do, right? And so this slide is kind of in response to a question that we get a lot. And the question is, what business question does engagement score answer? And so, you know, people ask that, and oftentimes there's a tendency to equate engagement with retention, right? And that's natural, right? They're very close, you know, but in reality, engagement score doesn't really answer one specific question, but it's part of the answer to many of the questions, right? To maybe even all the questions that that you're confronted with as an association professional. So things like how do I retain members? How to increase purchases or non-dues revenue? Who are the best candidates for leadership, for speaking engagements, for volunteering, things like that? Who are most likely to make a donation or to participate in some kind of promotion or campaign that I have, right? So it's almost like, how do I find X, right? How do I find the right members, for whatever call to action or whatever product I'm trying to sell or whatever service do I need? And so in the aggregate, it tells us things like, if you think back to to that ribbon chart, it tells us things like, are we doing a better job of engaging and connecting with our members, right? And are we doing better now than we were doing last month and the month before? And the last thing I would say here is the idea that engagement can tell you who needs attention, right? So, and that can be based on low engagement scores, or it could be based on low engagement maybe within one particular area, right? So there's lots of interesting and cool things that you can do when you have your engagement sorted by categories. You can compare those categories to each other and really get a picture of who's likely to need some attention.
Hey, Bill, real quick there. One thing I think is really interesting. I know when you ask a question like a net promoter score, for example, are you most likely, or how likely would you be to refer us to somebody? Oftentimes the temptation is to reach out to those people that give you a low score. But what I've learned is that the greatest reward, the greatest opportunity comes from reaching out to those people in the middle. That falls in as Net Promoter Score calls it, the passive people. Those are the people that you really have an opportunity to turn into promoters. And so it's interesting to me that you really let the haters be haters. Focus on the middle ground. Don't focus so much on those that are completely unengaged. Get those people that are a little bit engaged, a lot engaged.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it was in one of our sessions in the last couple of weeks, we talked about predictive models, right? For attendance, or predictive models for renewals. And most often that conversation is how do we affect the ones that are changeable, right? And it's a very similar conversation to Net Promoter Score. The propensity model breaks people up into deciles. So they're either in the least likely decile to renew, and that's typically something in the single digits, maybe even, or very low. And then at the top, you have people that are maybe 90+% likely to renew or likely to attend. And the basic theory is you don't want to be messaging those two groups the same. And maybe in some cases, you don't want to be messaging them at all. You want to focus more attention on the ones in the middle deciles where you can really affect, right? So it's very very analogous to those middle NPS score. All right. Okay, so we have this 360-degree score, and we're starting to know our members better, right? We're starting to know what they want, to know who needs attention, and why do we do that, right? So here's another slide that we've seen before. This is actually a HubSpot study. Personalized calls to action perform 202% better than basic calls to action. So, the idea here obviously is that the more we can know about our members, the more likely they are to do the things that we want them to do, right? In the aggregate, right? They're more likely to purchase, they're more likely to attend, to respond, and to do the other things that we wish that they would do more of. So we heard,
Bill, can you go back to that for a second? I saw this slide like 3 or 4 times as we were talking through this, and it never hit me like it did just now. It's even italicized, the word personalized calls. I mean, this, to me, this just shows the importance of finding a way to address our members at the individual level. How do we connect with the individual? And that's something I'm going to be talking about a little bit in the second half of this presentation. But personalized, that's awesome. Personalized calls to action perform 202% better. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to use this slide in your materials.
Well, I think I will. Thanks.
Okay, so I just want to go back and revisit. For those of you that were here a few weeks ago, Reggie Henry joined us. He talked a little bit about Propfuel as well, but his basic message was a couple of things. Number one, there was the story about the ASAE dump truck, and I think we probably, most of us have heard this one before. But the idea is that he asked member what the experience was like, and they said that it felt a lot like ASAE just sort of backed up the dump truck and dumped a whole load of all their products and services, basically everything that they offered, and it dumped it on top of them essentially. And so the idea here is we don't want to be the dump truck. We don't want to put all of our products and services in front of every member right away, the first day that they join. We want to be more mindful of what they want and probably also when, right? And so the second one is kind of a related story. I'm not sure who found this picture. I don't think it's the real person, obviously, but there was a member that came to Reggie, and she said, essentially, why I buy your products and services. I kind of do all the things that you ask me to do. I answer your surveys, participate in the community, et cetera. Why don't you know me, right? And that sort of hit Reggie. It resonated with him, and it's a good question, right? Why don't we know members better, right? We know that it's advantageous, for us to do so. We saw about the calls to action. We know that members purchase more when their experience is more personalized and all of that. So why don't we know them better? And the answer to that is, it's a great question, but it can be harder than it sounds, right? Even with the best tools. So thinking about a tool like Acumen, what do we do when we want to measure engagement score, right? But engagement scoring, not just in Acumen, but in AMS products and other things, it's been around for years. And most people that you talk to haven't quite figured it out, right? They haven't quite perfected it when it comes to, A-score and some of those other ones that have been around for a while. But the idea is that we collect as much data as we can. We measure, we collect and measure counts, right? How many times things happen, amounts of dollars and things, and we measure rates. Things like email open rates and click-through rates and things like that. And we do that because we're trying to infer and we're trying to calculate information, about the individual. And all of that effort, right, all of that data collection, all those calculations and all of that is meant to ultimately to know the member better, right? To be able to anticipate what they want and to provide it to them, right? And we've built out systems to do that, recommender systems, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, right? So there are things to take this data and to automate this process of understanding what a member wants, right? And so as a segue to to the next section where Dave's going to talk about this, I just want to offer this last thing, which Reggie also said, which is if you want to know something about your members, then sometimes the simplest thing to do is just ask, right? And that's kind of where a tool like Propfuel comes in.
Thanks, Bill. Nice transition. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been hearing a lot recently in these webinars that that oftentimes the answer to a lot of our questions is this: it's just ask. But what's interesting is how the heck do you ask 30,000 people a question and then act on it? Like, I mean, to me, it sounds like a survey, right? But a survey is not action-oriented, A. B, you're never going to get your members to answer a survey like that. So like, just ask sounds easy. What, are you going to pick up the phone and talk to somebody? Well, a lot of people do. Looking over on the chat earlier, we asked, so after the poll, what are some of what is really working well for you? And a lot of people, I think everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of them were related to the voice of the member. And so this is something that I want to start with in terms of sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get to the next slide here. There we go. So a lot of this has to do with this concept of voice of the member. But before we get there, the traditional approach to engaging our members is very much in analyzing our activity, behavioral, transactional data, especially. We're looking at, this dump truck that Reggie was talking about a couple weeks ago, and you saw a couple slides ago, this dump truck of information that we're loading into our members' laps. it comes from all this transactional data that we're getting. And so we believe that when we see something happen in the transactional data, when we see something, that allows us to change the activity. Well, maybe not a lot of people bought this session, so let's put a different session up. Or maybe the point with all this is we want to throw in another element. And the other element is the voice of the member. What this does, it doesn't just tell us what people are doing and when they're doing it and who's doing it. What it does is it tells us why they're doing it. And when we start to understand why people are doing something, and we add that into the behavioral and the transactional data, now we've really got some context. But it sounds challenging because now you're dealing with this unstructured data. So before we go any further, let me explain. There we go. Sorry, I'm gonna hopefully we can keep going with this. I'm having a tough time, Bill, with the arrows, but I think I got it now. So so the voice of the member, it's not just this qualitative data that we're seeing in our community when people type a question or type a long answer. There's actually a quantitative side to it as well. But the whole process of capturing the sentiment and the customer's expectations, this is all voice of the member, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. And again, it allows us to focus on why they're doing things as opposed to just what, who, and when they're doing it. Now, of course, when you're talking about voice of the member, sure, you can drill down at the individual level, or you could go up to the global level and find out what's happening as a whole. Now, it's interesting, voice of the member, we dubbed it voice of the member. The term actually voice of the customer comes from the corporate side. And in the corporate world, it's really, really interesting that one of the stats I found was that 80% of companies believe they're delivering an exceptional experience to their customer. But when the customers were asked if they felt as if they were receiving an exceptional experience, 8% said they were. So there's this gap in there somewhere. And I suspect this converts to associations pretty well too. So what the heck is driving this gap? The other point I want to make around the voice of the customer is understanding why people are doing things is really, really important. When we've discovered that 70% of buying experiences are based on how the customer feels, sentiment goes a long way. So understanding the sentiment and why people are doing things is really, really important to getting people engaged in the association. Other stats that I think speak to the voice of the customer, the voice of the member, they buy more, they spend more per transaction. There's greater retention, and the overall value of the member or the customer is 6 to 14 times higher. So the question is, how do you apply this voice of the customer concept? How do you apply this to associations? How does the voice of the member, in our case, make sense? Well, think about the life cycle of the member and all of the touch points we have with them, all of these periods that they're going through, from the new member experience to the existing member experience. Some of them are young members, some of them are not so young members, all the way to, you go through these virtual events, all the way to the time that they become a lapsed member and sadly maybe a dormant member. And every single one of these touch points is a point where we can capture their opinions and their perspectives. Well, Bill, do you have the link to the white paper I sent you?
I do. Yeah, it's.
Would you mind putting that into the chat while I continue on with this? What you're seeing here are 8 trends supporting this voice of the member concept. And the link that Bill's about to post is a link to something in our resources. It's a voice of the member ebook. It's about, I don't know, somewhere around 50 or 60 pages that talks about how associations can utilize voice of the member to drive retention, loyalty, revenue, and so on. So there's a lot of use cases. And it goes through all of these 8 points. I'm not going to focus on all 8 of these points, but I am going to focus on 3 of them. I'm going to focus on the first one, connections, not more transactions. Sorry, one second here. Bill, can you get me off to the next slide? There we go. I got it. So we're going to focus on continuous insights rather than periodic. Did I say connections? Not. Yeah, I meant we're going to focus on these three. Continuous insights rather than periodic studies, better technology, and hyper-personalization to workflows. Those are three areas that I really, really want to focus on because I think it's extremely relevant to this. And so let's jump into the continuous insights. So continuous insights, oftentimes when we're capturing insight, I hate the word insight, honestly, because it makes me think of a survey, and a survey doesn't have action associated with it. Hey, Bill, can you get me to the next slide? There we go. Thank you. So when it comes to this continual insight, the focus when you're talking about voice of the member, oftentimes you're checking in with them multiple times throughout the member journey. And that may mean multiple times over the course of a given year. And a check-in typically is asking a question, right? That's what stimulates the voice of the member. You're asking them a question, all kinds of questions you can ask. You'll see some examples of the questions if you're interested in downloading that book. And Bill, I can always put the link in there later if you can't find it. That's okay. Don't worry about it. No, I'll put it in at the end of the session. Here's the thing with surveys, though. You're lucky to get, I don't know, 8 to 12% is about what we're seeing average with the surveys. And the surveys are a snapshot in time. You're getting the feedback once a year, once every 3 years. And that's all it is. It's feedback that you're getting once a year, maybe. With this idea of the voice of the member and sending out check-ins multiple times over the course of the year, we have this thing called the global reach rate, which means you're going to go way deeper into your membership than that 8 to 12%. Over the course of any given year, you're likely to see about a 60 to 70% global reach rate, which means you're going to go way, way deeper in getting people to talk to you at some point. But more importantly is the interaction. It's the action that happens after somebody answers a question. And we're going to touch on that in the personalization part. Bill, I just saw you posted the link. Thank you.
It wasn't me, but thanks whoever did it.
Oh,
hey, just quick.
Thank you, my compadre.
Quick question,
okay.
Dave. Before we go on to this one, I wanted to ask you about marketing automation, right? So we talked a little bit about surveys, and it's in the sense that they're both asking questions, right? Propfuel is kind of similar to, I don't want to use the word similar, but it does some of the same things on a different way and different level than surveys do. And then also this idea of automating the workflow and personalizing the workflow is, like, a lot of us have used marketing automation before, and it's kind of a similar concept, right? So, I mean, you kind of have some conditions, and then there's a workflow that gets initiated based on that. So can you tell us of like how is it different, and sort of how your tools should be used and can be used with marketing automation?
Yeah. There's some significant differences and some significant similarities between marketing automation and what we refer to as an intelligent engagement platform. One does not replace the other. Oftentimes they're used together. And we're going to, in better technology, we're going to see some of this as well. Marketing automation oftentimes is talking to segments. It's talking to groups. We firmly believe that individuals play an incredible role in their industry. Groups spend less. It's harder to talk to a group of people than it is to talk to an individual. When you're talking to an individual, you have this opportunity to address their specific needs. This is something that Reggie talked about when he was talking about that dump truck. His member came to him and said, "How is it that you don't know me? Why are you talking to me like I'm a persona? Why are you talking to me like I'm a group of people?" That's what she was saying to him. And she said, "Why are you dumping all this stuff in my lap? Give me what I need. You know me by now." And so that's a difference, one difference between marketing automation and an intelligent engagement platform. An intelligent engagement platform is going to ask a question, and based on how you answer it, give them some very, very tangible, specific response to how they answered. Now that response could, and I'll show you some examples of that, but that's how you're going to personalize something where it's much, much more difficult to do that in terms of marketing automation when you're talking to group. Marketing automation oftentimes is also talking at people. You're sending stuff. In fact, that dump truck is marketing automation. You're sending a bunch of stuff to people. Now, yes, there's a lot of stuff you can do to personalize marketing automation, but generally speaking, it starts with you talking, not listening to what the member has to say. So those are a couple of the differences. I could probably do a whole webinar on the difference between marketing automation and yeah.
Let me also interrupt now. Just now's a good time. There's a question that came in the Q&A. And the question is this. It says, most of the active people in our membership are not the ones making the buying decision. So they normally have to go to finance to get approval or somewhere else. How do we utilize the voice of the member when that isn't the person ultimately making a buying decision?
I'm sorry, one more time, repeat that.
So most active people in our membership are not the ones making the buying decision. So how do they use the voice of the member when that person isn't the one ultimately making a buying decision?
Oh yeah, so it's a trade association where they have contacts under a certain organization. The person buying is probably the organizational contact. Why do you think the organizational contact is belonging? Why do you think they renew? Well, I'm sure there's many reasons, including advocacy, the resources you provide, but they're doing it probably because they want to create more value and provide value to their context, the people inside their organization. So what we're doing when we're sending out questions with you is we're trying to engage people just enough so that we know how to service them better. We want to know what the needs are of those individuals in the organization, even if they're not the one writing the check. If we're not giving them what they need inside the organization, the person with the checkbook is not going to write the check for the next year. So the idea is the voice of the member is important to find out from those people that we're trying to engage one way or another, whether they have the checkbook or not. If we're trying to engage them, the voice of the member is how you listen to what they're saying so that you can respond through workflows in an automated way, or perhaps even pick up the phone to engage those people. So I hope that answered your question. But yes, the idea, it doesn't necessarily, it depends on the campaign. There may be some renewal campaigns where it does matter that you're getting the person with the checkbook, in which case it's really important to figure out who you're sending which questions to. And so we organize those in what we call campaigns. You might have a renewal campaign that just goes out to the organizational contact. Does that make sense? Good.
Yes, thank you.
Tech, so better technology. So I'm seeing all kinds of phrases like unified, hybrid, multi-cloud management technologies. There's another one, automation and orchestration systems, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning. My understanding is in Silicon Valley, if you consider yourself an AI tool, your valuation just went up tenfold. Digital apps and services. I mean, it's just the buzzwords around technology is unbelievable, but it's there for a reason. And the reason is because technology is getting so awesome. When we look at intelligent engagement, some of the cool things you're going to see are frictionless interaction. That's one of the reasons we built this in a way so that people could click on an answer right in an email. So as opposed to the classic take our survey, you lose most people right away. But when you can answer a question, when it's frictionless, you can press a button and boom, you're done. It's almost easier than deleting the email. Artificial intelligence, there's our tenfold valuation right there, but we do have some sentiment analysis in here. The thing I like the most about this intelligent engagement and some of the new trends we're seeing is what we call system of action. And so we were very, very deliberate about making a platform that doesn't just capture insight. It's not a tool that you're gonna print out reports and bring them back to meetings and then discuss how you're gonna handle things. It's a tool that actually listens and takes action immediately based on workflows. And I'm gonna show you some examples of that. But this right here is how we how we personalize the workflow. I almost said standardize. Isn't that quite the opposite of personalized? So this is exactly how we personalize the experience. So let's talk about those points where we might personalize the experience. Again, this is a slide you saw a few minutes ago, but think about these points where we might engage the member along the way. let's look specifically at the new member experience, because this is one I hear about a lot. In fact, I saw somebody post earlier that they just rolled out this new member experience that sends, and I didn't catch it all, sends emails, and they figured out touch points and when to pick up the phone and call, and that's awesome. So one of the things that I'd suggest I'd love to see added to that is, instead of taking that dump truck and the day they join, by the way, the AMS tells Propfuel you joined. Propfuel then says, oh, we got someone, sends them a question, not a dump truck. First thing it does is sends them a question, not a dump truck filled with information. I actually got an email from an association I belong to. I counted literally 50 links, not including all the social media links. There were 50, it was a dump truck of information they were sending me, and that was just another newsletter. Now, what I would have preferred is if they sent me a question saying, hey, what's important to you right now? Or why did you join our association? So let's use that as an example. You send a question, day one, why did you join our association? Based on why they joined, A, it sends the results to different platforms, number one. Number two, we trigger an automated response to them where they might get access to documents or processes or sign up for something, or maybe there's a trigger to have somebody call them based on how they answered. But oftentimes, if I just answer, hey, I joined, let's say ASAE because I'm interested in getting my CAE, man, they send me this link directly to the CAE workflow and how I can sign up and where to get started with the CAE. Now that's relevant to my needs right now. No two people have the same exact needs over the course of the entire year. Everybody's unique, everybody's an individual, and that's why it's so important to customize and personalize your interaction and your engagement. All right, so again, we repeat this over and over again. Now these are a whole bunch of ways in which you can drive a return and improve retention and improve sales. There's two I want to focus on. One that we've seen like stunning results on. This is amazing. It drives me, it's just stunning to me how we can, or you guys can send out emails to your members saying, hey, your membership's about to lapse, time to renew. And some will, right? But there's always that group that won't. And then you send it again, and you send it again. And as it's coming up closer to lapsing, you send it again, and then it lapses. But now they're in the grace period, so you send it again, and you send it again. We got a client to sign on with us 2 months into their grace period, almost 2 months in. Immediately, we rolled out, and this was to a group of, I think they had 5,000 people. It was a fairly big association, 5,000 people that did not yet renew it's on an annual renewal program. February 26 or something. At that point, 5,000 people had not renewed. So we sent out with them an email saying, just a simple email saying, hey, did you know your membership expired? They got hundreds of people. I think they got something like 400, 500 people to respond to this email. Of those, 53% of them said, oh my gosh, I had no idea my membership expired. And all of those people were then sent directly to a renewal link. The people that said, yes, I knew my membership didn't expire, many of them responded with a link saying, I just haven't had time. And so we also sent them to a slightly different message that led them down the path of ultimately renewing. That one campaign, which had 3 questions over the course of 3 weeks, that one campaign, by the way, this is a group of people that haven't responded to anything. Their membership was already done. They were at the end of their grace period. And we drew in another $98,000 of renewals from that one 3-part campaign. It was awesome. Another example, and by the way, I'm happy to answer questions specific to either one of these campaigns or any of these campaigns for that matter. If you see something in here you're curious about, feel free to ask about it.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
We do have one, and it's probably from one slide ago, but I think now is a good time to answer it as well, which is, how do you feel about having why did you join, or what can we help you with today? Like questions like that in the member join form instead of sending it later in an email. Do you think that would work?
Yeah, it's interesting. We could do it either way. You know, you could take a question, embed it into a member join, a member join form that they sign up. Yeah, interesting. I think that's a good place to take the question. The bigger question I have for you is not what do you ask and where do you ask it? The bigger question is, how do you respond to it automatically and in a personalized way? So if in your membership form, you can automate it. So based on how they answered that question, now you're directing them to resources that's really valuable specifically to them. That's awesome. Yeah, totally do that. But that's the kind of thing that's really important to do over the course of the year, over and over again. And so we want to, again, somebody asked me the other day with the civil unrest that we're experiencing right now. Somebody asked, they said, listen, we think we want to send a question out to our membership. And they came and said, what should we ask? And which, by the way, I love working with our clients like that, because they do actually ask to treat me, and it makes me feel like I'm a consultant, which is nice, instead of a software guy. And so they said, what should we ask? And my response to them was, it doesn't matter what you ask as much as what you do with their answer, right? So this goes back to your question, what if we put it in the form? Well, that's cool, but it's just a question and an answer. What matters is, what do you do? What is the workflow? What happens? What is the member experience based on their answer? And what I would propose is, if you're not sending them something directly related to how they answered, then it's garbage. Yeah, that's a strong word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not garbage. It's just far less valuable, and it's not engaging. That's for sure. It's not an engagement question. Now it's an insight. You're dissecting your members as they sign up.
Would you say that if you're not going to take action based on the answer, it's better not to ask the question in the first place? Would you go that far?
It really depends. I mean, a lot of people want to ask questions because they need insight. Like they need to know something from their membership. COVID is a great scenario where people could, they want to know the status of whether or not their members are open. Like
sure.
Ceramics Society of America did a survey asking retailers if they were open. You know, it's really important. Now, based on the answer, we actually set up some unique workflows based on how they were answering, some resources that would be helpful to people that were open and helpful to people that weren't. And then they also took the results and they put it into the results from the previous question and put it into the answer. So there's workflows you can do, but there's sometimes, just a good old fashioned survey works.
Good.
Would use SurveyMonkey for that. Yeah, if you just want to ask a question, use SurveyMonkey or put it in your form. The value to something like Propfuel is the intelligent engagement part. It's the ability to interact with somebody based on how they're answering your questions. So the other example I wanted to touch on here is virtual conferences. And there's a lot of virtual conferences going on now, which is why I picked that particular one. There's registration drives that you can do by asking questions, and based on how they answer, drive them, push them in the direction of specific sessions that might be valuable to them. There's the actual conference engagement, where a week or two before you're asking questions, or a week after you're asking questions. And then of course, there's the conversion, the member drive. Grab the people that attended the conference that aren't members. Let's try to convert them into members. Now, some of that might apply to you and some of that might not. But those are some examples of how people are using intelligent engagement. So here's a couple weeks ago, you might have seen Reggie demonstrate. I think I stole this slide from Reggie. This is a look at generally speaking, how it works. Some information comes in from a resource like Acumen or AMS, and it gets dropped into Propfuel. It tells us there's a trigger that says, hey, somebody just joined, or somebody just renewed, or something like that. For ASAE, this is a renewal campaign. They get entered in this campaign, they wait a period of time, they get the first question, they wait 2 weeks, they get another question, they wait another month, and they get the next question. This section over here, and so they're the questions. The section over here are the actions. Now, this is what it looks like. When they send an email, it comes across, you can answer right in the email. Based on how you answer, you get a very specific result. So it looks like this person must have clicked on membership marketing communications, and now they've got the membership and marketing resources right in front of them. This is one of many kinds of results you might get. And they also get an email. So they get a landing page and then they get an email from Amy with her contact information. So it's in their inbox. So there's all kinds of actions that you might take to intelligently engage your members. So going back to that form thing, that's cool. Get the answer. But if it's not doing one of these things here, if it's not showing a landing page or redirecting to a URL or embedding a different question or sending them, responding to with a different email or alerting somebody internally or adding them to a different campaign, if it's not doing any of these things, then all it is a survey. So I would argue intelligent engagement is the way we're going to personalize people's experiences as opposed to just dissecting them to learn from them. And so this is what it looks like when you're going to, I mean, oftentimes this stuff does provide great insight, but this isn't the reason you're doing it. You're not doing it for the insight as much as you're doing it to engage members. And so this is where, Bill, I'm going to turn it back to you in a second, but I'm going to end it with this. What our piece of the pie is the iterative, here, let me go back to that. There we go. So our piece of the pie is this iterative, rapid fire process of continually asking questions, capturing the need and acting on the member's need over and over and over and over again throughout the member journey. That's what we do.
Okay. And so if you look at this, there's kind of this cycle on the inside, right? Which says Propfuel, the cycle of ask, capture, and act. And those are all those sort of micro engagements that Dave was just describing. And then we've also talked a lot about the broader concept of engagement, which is where we're concerned with, in the aggregate, what are the things that people are doing and how do we measure them over time, right? And so this is really interesting because we saw in the previous slides how data that you get from Acumen can help to build your list, right? So think about it, and there's a parallel to marketing automation here in the sense that you build your lists and based on the data that you have, not just from your AMS, but the data that you have from across all of your other platforms, right? So that's the real value of a repository like Acumen, because it helps you to understand, not only the right questions to ask, but who to ask them to, right? So it's a combination of that, and then these trigger events like renewals and things like that.
Hey, Bill, Michael here says, perhaps asking at the time of join will allow to customize welcome emails to avoid the dump truck effect. Exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. Instead of dumping everything on them, ask them what's important to them, and then a workflow automatically sends them stuff related to that. Yep. But then you do it again and again and again with different questions.
And so, yeah, thank you. And so one of the things that you'll hear us talk about a lot also with engagement is not just the activities, but the preferences and the interests. And we do, sentiment analysis, right? So again, it's this idea of trying to get at some of this data about what people prefer and what they want. And then we also can supplement that by asking them. But the point I'm making here is that all of these questions and answers, all of these cycles, from Propfuel or from other tools that get information on members, is that this is also feeding into your broader engagement data and your engagement scoring. So every single one of these questions and answers tells you something about the member that helps you build this better digital profile over time. And so the point here is that when it comes to taking action, Acumen is about segments and populations of people taking action in the aggregate over time, whereas Propfuel is about individual people taking action right now, right? Some very specific action now, and they work well together. So that you're not, so your end goal is to get them to take action, but you're also using using those results and that data to improve your connection with members overall.
Yeah. Acumen tells Propfuel, it's a trigger. Hey, something happened, or there's a segment that needs some attention. So you put the segment in, and then the segment hits people with individual questions that then results in individual answers, which results in an action. And then all of that stuff is put back into Acumen. It's just this iterative process that you're seeing here to allow us to better nurture our members down a path over the long term. I think that's how I see Acumen's involvement with this, whereas Propfuel is this constantly rapidly spinning wheel. And Tip says, they had they sent out a bunch of invoices and people weren't responding to it. He says there's something about the ask versus the call to action that makes a difference.
Yep.
Asking a question has a different mental effect on people than just saying, hey, click here to renew. It's really fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hence the 53% of people that responded saying, hey, I didn't know my membership expired.
All right. Okay, so we got about 5 minutes left here. I'm going to go to a couple
Hey, Bill, I've got like hours. I can hang here all day, all night long.
That's a good point, actually. So in a couple of our sessions, we've had some questions, and we can for real that ran over time, and we've actually turned some of the guests into panelists, to come on and discuss things with us. It's pretty cool. If anybody wants to hang around and do that, then Dave just volunteered. I'm happy to do it as well.
Bill, I got to interrupt again because I'm reading these comments and it's awesome. So Scott Ozer has a service where he actually picks up the phone and calls people, his team. And so I've been talking to him in the past, and the way we're using Propfuel with Scott's team is Propfuel identifies who to call and when to call them, as opposed to calling 3,000 people in your membership, which is exhausting and expensive. Yeah. What if we could identify the 200 people of those 3,000 that are really, really important to call? And that's what Scott's team does.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Good to hear. Okay, so just a couple of closing thoughts to wrap things up. And again, happy to stick around and answer additional questions. So first, think of engagement as an exchange of value, right? And aim for that sweet spot, right? That middle ground where there's a kind of an even exchange of value between the association and the members. Secondly, there's this idea of micro engagements and the macro level. So that's kind of like, Propfuel on that inner cycle, which feeds into and is fed by this outer cycle, which is more like what Acumen does with our overall engagement. And then the last thing is the concept of data informed, not data driven, right? So you've heard us talk about this a lot, probably a lot of you have. And the idea here is that, the data is a tool, and that it really does require the insight and the wisdom of the individuals, right? I mean, we're, professionals, and we use data. We should be using data to make decisions, but it doesn't make decisions, by itself in a vacuum, right? So our collective experience and intuition and things are also valuable there, right? And a couple last ones for Dave.
Yeah, people are individuals. I mean, the most of us in our associations, the goal is to empower the community, right? But we're doing that at the individual level, and we have to interact and engage our members at the individual level if we want to empower them. Number one. Number two, the voice of the member is often overlooked. You got data, you got that dump truck full of data, right? But what we need a little bit more of is the context, the why people are doing things. And then third, and the most important, is that if you have a system that is not taking action, it is not an engagement platform. An engagement platform is something that is taking action and doing something at the individual level based on the voice of the member. Boom.
Yeah, boom. All right, so here's a couple of resources. Those are QR codes. So you can, point your phone at those, and that'll link you to two resources that we thought you might be interested in. The first one is the ebook, Voice of the Member from Propfuel. And the second one is getting started with member engagement scoring. That's an A2 resource, and it's, it will give you some of the high level concepts for what you need to do in order to think about engagement scoring. So I see, yes, we got a link to the Propfuel book is in the chat, and both of these are available on our websites, right? In the resources section, you can get to those easy. All right, so I'm gonna let David DiLorenzo take us home.
All right, let me get back on here. All right, that was great. So just wanted to thank everybody for listening and hanging in with us. As always from Dave, a fire hose of information. A lot of stuff coming at you. So
Dump truck of information, Dave.
A dump truck. No, didn't use dump truck.
I'm offended. That's offensive.
As always, we hope your minds are full and your cups are empty. And we really hope you can join us in the future for more of these discussions. Just a reminder that this is a recurring meeting, so you now have access to our weekly discussions, and you will get a weekly notification reminding you of that. Detailed descriptions of each session can be found on our website at associationanalytics.com/virtual. And if you are unable to attend any future events, just like this one, we share out the recordings for you to view on demand. For the next installment next week in our webinar series, we're going to continue to explore some other ways to engage, especially now in these current times. And Higher Logic will be joining us for a discussion on data-informed community management and engagement. So once again, have a wonderful day, and thank you for a fabulous discussion panel. And I think you're open for overtime at this point.
All right, hang out for a minute.
That was fun, guys. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah.
And you guys do such a good job with these. You really do. Like you do, I mean, week after week, and I haven't been able to attend them all, but I've been to enough to know you guys are doing a great job with this. I did see one question in here, or comment. No, it's a question. This person said, in our organizations, an anonymous attendee, event registration forms, in their event registration forms, we ask registrants to provide the main reason they are attending the event. Would it be helpful to base our knowledge, know before you go event emails around this instead of having a dump truck of information? Yeah, so that's exactly how we're using these questions when it comes to virtual events, is we're asking questions so that we can direct people to specific sessions that would be valuable for them. Anyway, it's this was fun. I love this topic, Bill.
Good. Likewise. Likewise. And thanks thanks again to everybody. If there's anything else you want to jump in the chat or the Q&A, we'll be happy to answer that. Otherwise, we'll hopefully see you next week.
Yeah, Michael, engagement really, really is an emotional thing. It's interesting. So I've been asking people, and if you're still here and hanging out, tell me what you think. What is engagement? Like, how would you define engagement? If you're sticking around, it's okay. If I don't know how many, it looks like we have a fair number still here. But engagement, yeah, it's all the way from clicking on a link to the other side of the spectrum, which is feeling this sense of identity with your organization. I'm an entrepreneur. I consider that's a big part of my identity. And I belong to Entrepreneurs Organization based in Alexandria. Old Alexandria. And I feel a very strong connection to that association. And that I would consider is the goal of engagement, to create these quote unquote super members, to create people that are highly engaged. So yes, I'm with you, man. Totally emotional.
Synchronicity, yeah.
Synchronicity, engagement, Aaron, engagement equals synchronicity, meaning I'm assuming it means you share the same perspectives, the same values, you have the same overriding goals and objectives between the organization and the individual. Is that what you mean, Aaron?
Yeah, give and take, sure. Yeah, so that's kind of yeah, I mean that's essentially the idea that we're trying to convey with that exchange of value, right? I mean if the members are perceiving value, and if they are having a good experience, right? They're having a good emotional connection, with the association, then they're going to be happy to spend money on the things you want them to spend on, to volunteer their time, to do the things that you that you want them to do. Sure.
I think it's interesting too. That ebook that we wrote, I think we saw quite a few people downloaded that already. There's a section in there about people just really want to be heard. Like really, actually, let me rephrase that. People actually just want to say something. Sometimes it's not even being heard that's important. I don't like that perspective when it comes to engagement. I think engagement requires somebody being heard, but it's amazing how much people want to put their perspective in. And if you look at like open up your social media, go to Instagram, and you go to like some influencer and something they said, it's incredible the number of comments. And who's reading these? It's unbelievable how many people are saying something. So if we're an association and we're not giving our members an opportunity to express their voice, if we're not giving them a chance to say something, they're going to go somewhere else where they can say stuff. They're going to go to social media and say stuff. We want to give people the opportunity to say something. So anyway, I think that's a really interesting element. And then even better, Bill, if you can do something with what they said, so much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hyper-personalization. Yeah, that's 100%, right? I mean, there's a lot of science on this when it comes to like purchasing, right? In the consumer space, like how do you get somebody to connect emotionally with your product, your message, and they'll make a purchase, based on that. But yeah, I mean, it's a very similar type concept when it comes to to any call to action, right? I mean, even if it's provide us this information, right? Whatever it may be that you need.
I'm curious, Michael, who do you work for? I love your comments in here. I'd love to. And Tip, can we get these people in here? Like, can we do a chat? Can we bring them in as panelists and just talk?
We can.
Tip engagement also reminds members that am I hijacking your event?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Engagement also, was that your beer?
That was my beer. It was empty, fortunately.
Dude, get it. I'll handle this. Engagement also reminds members that they've bought into a relationship that requires them to work and get something out of it. Yes, when we can create ways to get them to talk to us and then communicate in their sweet spot, that's the ideal. Oh no, the beer. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, cut off. Yeah.
Tip, I'm with you, man.
All right. So.
My past association was so terrified of people's emotions, they moderated the heck out of the community, and the community never took off. Yeah, that's interesting. It's sometimes you run into people. I've actually heard people say, I don't want to know what people think. Like, it's amazing. But sometimes they feel like if we know what people think, then they're going to expect us to do something about it. And they're just so overwhelmed with everything else that they can't handle that, which I get.
All right, so I was just asking Brian if people can join the panel. He's usually.
I don't mean to. I'm
causing
a problem really cool here. Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate you coming to this. I'm so grateful for the invitation to talk today because I really enjoy this topic. I'm very passionate about empowering the individual. And you know why I'm so passionate about this, Bill, is because so few people are doing it. Yeah. And the ones that are doing it, they're doing it manually. Like they're picking up the phone, which is good. Do it, but you can't do that for 20,000 people.
Right, you can't scale for sure.
Imagine me on like 3 beers, by the way. Like this is beer free. I had my beer here and I tend to drink it later, but there's, I'll open it. That beer will get opened, I'll tell you that. But man, can you imagine me on 3 beers? It's like you take this enthusiasm, because I really, man, I'm a lover, not a fighter. 3 beers, I'm telling you how much I love you. Bill, I'm like, I love you, man.
That's great. All right. Well, I was hoping we could figure out how to let some of the guests join the panel. I apologize.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank Mike, Kip, Cynthia. You guys are great for sticking around and participating like this. Thanks so much. I know there's a bunch of people that are here but not participating. That's okay too. But thank you all for being an active part of this. Yeah, Alex. Wait a minute, Alex Lord. Are you my distant cousin, Alex Lord? This is, do we know each other? There's a Alex Lord that I'm actually related to. I'm wondering if that's you.
Right, we're going to make a connection here.
That's too bad. No, he's in Connecticut.
Actually,
no, I take it back. New York, Yonkers, New York is where the Lord Will family is from. So yeah, not. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, Bill. We can't hang this up yet.
Okay,
Alex
okay.
Lord, New York. There's a Lord family. Alex, send me an email. I'd love to talk to you. Dave@propfuel.com. I want to see if we're related. That's awesome.
It's too bad we couldn't do it live on the call. It could break.
Yeah, that would be great. That's a beer conversation right there. All right, Bill. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Dave.